In the vast, dusty land of the Wild West, where law and order often seemed like mere rumors, there were a few names that sent chills down the spines of even the bravest men. One of those names was Jesse McAllister. Born into a rough life, Jesse didn't choose the life he ended up living. It was the only life he knew. Raised in a poor family with more days of hunger than satisfaction, Jesse quickly learned that survival in the West meant relying on your wits and your strength. From an early age, Jesse was used to the sound of gunshots and the sight of dust storms swirling around the small, isolated towns where he grew up. His parents, struggling to make ends meet, were often too busy to care for him, and as he got older, Jesse started spending more time on his own. He would often roam the open lands, watching the world unfold from a distance, learning from the people around him, both good and bad. He noticed the way some people could manipulate the law to their advantage, and how others used their strength to take what they wanted. By the time he was a teenager, Jesse was already skilled in the art of survival. He knew how to read the land, how to track animals, and how to hide his presence from any enemy. But it wasn't long before he realized that being a good tracker wasn't enough to get by in the West. Sometimes, you had to fight for what you wanted. And so Jesse started down a path that would define him for years to come. Jesse didn't become an outlaw overnight. His first crime was a simple theft, a few supplies from a general store to help his struggling family. But once he tasted the thrill of getting away with something, it became easier to justify bigger actions. He wasn't a bad person, he told himself. He was just doing what was necessary to survive. And after all, who could blame him in a place where the law was scarce and the powerful often took whatever they wanted? As Jesse grew older, his crimes became more daring. He joined a small gang of outlaws, men who had similar histories of hardship and struggle. Together, they rode from town to town, robbing banks, stagecoaches, and stores. They were careful, clever, and always managed to stay one step ahead of the law. Jesse became known for his quick thinking and sharp reflexes. He could plan a robbery with precision and then escape into the wilderness without leaving a trace. His reputation grew, and so did the fear of his name. But Jesse didn't enjoy the fear he inspired. At first, it felt like power, something he had never felt before. But over time, as the bloodshed and destruction mounted, he started to feel differently. He began to question the path he was on. The memories of the people he had robbed and hurt lingered in his mind. Sometimes at night he would lie awake and wonder if he had made the right choices. But the thrill of the chase, the rush of outsmarting the law, was addictive. It was difficult to imagine a life without it. It wasn't long before Jesse became one of the most feared outlaws in the West. His gang was known for being ruthless, and Jesse himself was often seen as the mastermind behind their most daring heists. People in the towns they targeted would whisper his name in fear, and the law had placed a large bounty on his head. But even with all the danger that followed him, Jesse couldn't seem to stop. He was too deep into this life, and with each robbery he got better, more confident, more skilled, and more elusive. It was as if he had become one with the land, able to hide in plain sight. But eventually, even the most skilled outlaws are caught. After a particularly daring heist in a small town, Jesse's gang was ambushed. His friends were captured, and Jesse alone managed to escape. However, it wasn't long before he realized that his time was running out. The law was closing in on him faster than he could run. His past had finally caught up with him. Jesse went into hiding, moving from one remote town to another, always looking over his shoulder, never staying in one place for too long. The once invincible outlaw was now a hunted man. The bounty on his head grew larger, and he knew it was only a matter of time before someone would take it. The fear of capture started to gnaw at him, and for the first time in a long while, Jesse felt powerless. He began to wonder if this was the end. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Jesse spent more time thinking about his past decisions. He was tired of running, tired of the constant violence, and tired of living in fear. He knew that sooner or later he would be caught. There was no escaping the law forever. But in those quiet moments, he started to realize that maybe he didn't want to escape anymore. He wasn't sure if he had the strength to change, but he wished he could find another way. He wondered what life might have been like if he had made different choices. Then, one fateful day, Jesse found himself cornered in a small town. The U.S. Marshals had tracked him down once again, and this time there was no escape. He fought hard, as he always had, but it was clear that his luck had run out. He was captured and brought before a judge who sentenced him to death. His name was now known across the West, not as a man of courage or skill, but as one of the most dangerous criminals to ever roam the frontier. As Jesse sat in his cell, waiting for his execution, he thought about the life he had led. He had no one to blame but himself. The crimes he had committed, the people he had hurt, he knew he could never undo them. He had no idea what would happen to him next. He had lived a life of violence and crime, and now it seemed like his time had come. But little did Jesse know, his story was far from over. Fate had a way of changing course in the Wild West, and Jesse's life was about to take a turn he never expected. It was during this time, when Jesse was at his lowest, that a woman named Alia entered the picture. Alia was a leader of the Apache people, known for her wisdom and strength. She had heard of Jesse's skills, and she saw something in him that others couldn't. She believed that he could be more than just a criminal. She believed that his skills could be used for something greater. Alia saw potential in Jesse. She saw that he had survived in the harshest of conditions, that he was capable of thinking on his feet, and that he had the ability to lead others. While most saw him as a villain, Alia saw a man who had been shaped by the same hardships she had faced. She approached the authorities with a bold offer. If Jesse agreed to fight alongside her people, she would make sure his life was spared. At first, Jesse didn't believe it. How could he, a man condemned to die, be of any use to the Apache? But Alia's words stayed with him. She spoke with a calmness and wisdom that he hadn't heard in a long time. And in that moment, Jesse realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the chance he had been waiting for. A chance to change. Jesse's life had been full of chaos and pain, and now, with the chance for something different on the horizon, he couldn't believe it. Alia, the Apache woman who had offered him a second chance, had spoken to him with such calmness and wisdom that for a moment, he almost forgot where he was. Sitting in that cold cell awaiting his execution, the offer felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. At first, Jesse wasn't sure whether to believe her. Could he really change his ways? He had been a criminal for so long. It felt almost impossible to imagine a life outside of that world. Still, something about Alia's presence made him wonder if perhaps for the first time, he might have a purpose beyond surviving on the run. His past wasn't something he could erase, but maybe, just maybe, he could use his skills for something greater than himself, something good. After a long, restless night, Jesse made up his mind. He agreed to Alia's proposal, though he had no idea what would come next. The following day, he was freed from his cell under the condition that he would join the Apache people. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he was willing to give it a chance. Alia had promised that if he helped the Apache, he would be spared, but Jesse didn't care much about that. He was more interested in finding out what he could do for them. Maybe it was the first step to truly changing his life. The journey from the town to the Apache camp was long and difficult. Jesse had always been a skilled rider, but this was different. The landscape was unfamiliar, and the open plains stretched for miles, offering little more than dust and rocks. As they rode, Jesse could feel the weight of the past lifting from his shoulders. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about his next escape or the bounty on his head. He wasn't even thinking about the life he had left behind. Instead, he thought about the future. A future that seemed uncertain but still full of possibility. When they finally reached the Apache camp, Jesse was struck by the way the Apache people lived. Their homes were simple, tents made of hides and fires burning brightly in the center of their camp. But it wasn't the simplicity of their lives that struck him. It was the peace he felt there. There was a quiet strength in the way the Apache carried themselves, an unspoken bond of trust and respect that seemed to run deeper than anything Jesse had ever known. He had never seen such unity before, and it made him wonder if he had been searching for something like this his whole life. Alia wasted no time in introducing Jesse to her people. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She told them about his past, about the crimes he had committed, and about the offer she had made to save him. Some of the Apache were skeptical. They had every reason to be. They didn't know Jesse, and they certainly didn't know if they could trust him. But Alia's word was powerful, and they agreed to give him a chance. Over the next few weeks, Jesse started to train with the Apache. The training was unlike anything he had experienced before. In his previous life, he had relied on brute strength and fast thinking to get by, but the Apache way was different. They taught him the importance of patience, of being one with the land, and of respecting nature. He learned how to track animals, to move silently through the forests and hills, and to use the terrain to his advantage. They didn't just teach him how to fight, they taught him how to think, how to survive, and how to live with honor. Jesse was a quick learner. He took to the training with a quiet intensity, determined to prove that he could be more than the man he had been. Alia was a patient teacher, guiding him through every lesson, always encouraging him to do better. She saw something in Jesse that no one else had seen. She believed in him, and that belief gave him the strength to push through the hardest moments. The shame he had felt for all the years of crime slowly began to fade. For the first time, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. He wasn't just a man on the run anymore. He was part of a family, a community. As the days went on, Jesse's bond with the Apache grew stronger. He learned their customs, their language, and their way of life. The Apache had a deep connection to the earth, and Jesse began to understand what that meant. He realized that he had been living in a way that was disconnected from the world around him. Now he was learning to live in harmony with it. The change wasn't easy, but it was real. And each day, Jesse felt himself becoming a little more like the man he wanted to be. Alia played a key role in this transformation. She was not just a leader, but a mentor to him. She shared stories from her own life, stories of hardship and survival, of loss and triumph. Her strength and wisdom were a source of inspiration for Jesse. He learned from her how to be patient and calm in the face of adversity, how to lead by example, and how to never give up, even when things seemed impossible. She taught him that true strength wasn't about how fast you could run or how hard you could fight. It was about your heart, your spirit, and your ability to stay true to who you were. No matter the challenges you faced, months passed, and Jesse began to feel at home among the Apache. He was no longer the outlaw who had terrorized towns. He was a warrior, a protector of his people. He had learned how to fight with honor, how to defend what was right, and how to stand up for those who couldn't defend themselves. But despite all the progress he had made, Jesse knew that there was still much more for him to do. He was no longer running from the law, but he still had to prove himself, not just to the Apache, but to himself. One day, news came that a group of U.S. soldiers were marching toward the Apache camp. They were on a mission to force the Apache off their land, to drive them from the only place they had ever known. The Apache were not a violent people, but they would not let their land be taken from them without a fight. Jesse knew this was the test he had been waiting for. This was his chance to prove that he had truly changed, that he could use his skills for something good. The night before the soldiers arrived, Jesse met with Alia and the other Apache leaders. They discussed their plan, and Jesse was given a critical role. It wasn't about attacking the soldiers. It was about using their knowledge of the land to outsmart them, to protect the Apache people without unnecessary violence. Jesse was ready. He had trained for this moment, and he wasn't going to back down. The following day, as the soldiers approached, Jesse led a small group of Apache warriors into the hills, where they would use the terrain to their advantage. The soldiers were unaware of the danger that lay ahead, and they marched right into the trap. Thanks to Jesse's quick thinking and the Apache's strategy, the soldiers were outmaneuvered and forced to retreat. No lives were lost, and the Apache people were safe. After the battle, Jesse stood alongside Alia, looking at the land they had just protected. He knew that this was his redemption, that he had finally found a purpose. He wasn't just a man running from his past anymore. He was part of something bigger, a warrior for justice, for freedom, and for the people he now called family. Jesse had truly changed, and in that moment he realized that maybe, just maybe, he had found the peace he had been searching for all his life.